Let's do it. Good morning. We are still in chapter 1 of First Corinthians, but we are finishing it up today. And so we are going to start by reading the first few scriptures of chapter 1. So we're going to do 18 through 21. And I want us to read it from the Message Bible. Anybody have the Message Bible handy? If you don't, I can read it. But anybody have the Message Bible handy?
I do not. I'm sorry. Could you the title? I didn't see it really quick. We was in
I
prayer.
didn't have one. Oh, yes, I did. God's power and wisdom. Yes, I did. Did somebody just say something? Good morning, Norman. Jackie, do you have a Message Bible?
I don't, not before me.
Okay, all right, I'll read it. So verses 18 through 21. The message that points to Christ on the cross seems like sheer silliness to those hell-bent on destruction. But for those on the way of salvation, it makes perfect sense. This is the way God works, and most powerfully as it turns out. It's written, I'll turn conventional wisdom on its head. I'll expose so-called experts as crockpots. So where you can find someone truly wise, truly educated. So where can you find someone truly wise, truly educated, truly intelligent in this day and age? Hasn't God exposed it all as pretentious nonsense? Since the world and all its fancy wisdom never had a clue when it came to knowing God, God in his wisdom took delight in using what the world considers stupid, preaching of all things, to bring those who trust him into the way of salvation. Come off camera, those who can, and tell me, what's your key takeaways from just that little set of scriptures? Just that set of scriptures. Good morning, Angela. What's your takeaway?
Good morning.
You all know I can wait for a long time. What's your takeaway?
I'm sorry. I was just talking. That he is the one that I was, listening to you, but I have the Christian Standard.
Mm-hmm.
He is the law. Somebody else go.
Help her out. What'd you take away?
Christ,
I
I have it.
Oops.
Go ahead, James.
I was just I kept reading it over and over again while you were going through it, and it really, the very beginning of it just says, look, I know there's all these people out here who are so-called experts, and I'm here to tell you, wait, that they're gonna all get exposed, and all these people who are telling you all these things that sound like they know everything, they're gonna be exposed. Is the first portion of this.
Don't go past.
At least
Don't go past 21. Don't go past 21. Mm-hmm.
And that those of us who know, we can see it. It's made plain to us.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that gets to that first part, right? So those of us, those who are basically in the world, this message of Christ, remember, what is Paul's goal? What is Paul's mission? Start off with an easy one. What's Paul's mission?
Preach the gospel.
Preach the gospel. Preach the
To
gospel.
Gentiles.
To Gentiles. Exactly. And so his point is, the message that points to Christ seems like sheer silliness to those hell-bent on destruction. So for folks who are not believing God and now not going to believe the gospel, you're hell-bent on destruction. Let's be clear. You're doing all the things wrong that are going to lead you straight to hell. So this message of Christ seems foolish to you. But to those who believe that salvation exists and that Jesus Christ died for our salvation, this message makes perfect sense. It's not foolish to you at all. And so he goes on to talk about wisdom, which is where we're going to spend our time. Let's keep reading. I'm going to keep reading now, 22, starting at 22. While Jews clamor for miraculous demonstrations and Greeks go in for philosophical wisdom, we go right on proclaiming Christ, the crucified. Jews treat this like an anti-miracle, and Greeks pass it off as absurd. But to us who are personally called by God himself, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is God's ultimate miracle and wisdom, all wrapped up in one. Human wisdom is so tinny, so impotent, next to the seeming absurdity of God. Human strength can't begin to compete with God's weakness. Take a good look, friends, at who you were when you got called into this life. I don't see many of the brightest and the best among you. Not many influential, not many from high society families. Isn't it obvious that God deliberately chose men and women that the culture overlooks and exploits and abuses? Chose those nobodies to expose the hollow pretensions of the somebodies. That makes it quite clear that none of you can get by with blowing your own horn before God. Everything that we have, right thinking and right living, a clean slate and a fresh start, comes from God by way of Jesus Christ. That's why we have the saying, if you're going to blow a horn, blow a trumpet for God. I see a hand raised. Deacon Burke or Johnson?
Yeah.
I had with that was the unsaved world doesn't understand that God changes sinners into saints. And the natural world and the unsaved world, they don't understand that only God can do that. You can't do it yourself. Okay, so that's why we see a change in other people as we go, but we didn't do it. God did it in us when we got saved. That's all.
Now, James Michael, you can pick up on where you were wanting to go. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
That's where I was headed, was that all of this becomes that for those who don't follow, we got to be really careful that we don't think it's us, it's him, and that they've got to be really careful to understand it's him, not us, and that he does all things, not just some things, but all things, and it's only through him that those things are possible.
What else? Anybody else?
My verse basically I feel it says, let those who boast, but boast in God, boast in the Lord. That's what you're gonna do, boast in God. He is the one.
Okay. What else?
He despised those of the world. In the world, I'm sorry.
And we're missing part of the most obvious part. There's a lot, every scripture has a lot, right? Because it's the Bible and we will never understand it all. But the big thing, the big takeaway is we're not nearly as smart as we think we are. We are not nearly as smart as we think we are. And so it says in verse 22-ish, while Jews clamor for miraculous demonstrations. So they're looking, all that they're interested in proving that God is miracles, signs, and wonders. And then we've got the Greeks who are all about philosophical wisdom. And his point is, hey, okay, none of that compares to the wisdom that I have and the wisdom that I gave you through Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is wisdom. So until we embrace that fact, which is the message, until we embrace that fact, everything we think we know, we don't really know. We don't really know. And so in any wisdom that we do have, because it doesn't say we don't have wisdom, right? But any wisdom that we do have, which is getting to Yolanda's point, comes from God. Therefore, we can't take credit for it. So if we think we're really wise and, like, wow, that was a good thing, that's because God gave it to us. And so we should not boast in and of ourselves to say we are so great, we are so intelligent, we are so smart, we are so wise. We should boast in the Lord. That's the crux of that whole scripture. That's the crux of that whole scripture. Anything to add before I keep moving? All right, so one of the things he mentions this phrase conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom. Who can tell me what conventional wisdom is? Conventional wisdom. How do we define that?
I'm guessing here, but
Mhm.
I think it has to do with the things that have been proven out prior. So it's what everybody thinks based on what they've experienced or thought they knew prior.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The
Any
wisdom of man, not God.
Yes, yes, yes. There it is.
And we have a lot of that going on today, right now, even in the world right now. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got it. So if you look at a technical definition, it's the body of ideas or explanations generally accepted by the public. Generally accepted by the public. And to your point, and it's usually in a certain field or area, but you especially find this around religion. So some examples of conventional wisdom, and what the difference between wisdom, godly wisdom, conditional wisdom is exactly what you said, Deacon. It is conventional wisdom is man's wisdom that may or may not be grounded in biblical scripture versus God's wisdom. And so if you look at just a few of these, and I'll read them for those of you who are not looking at your screens, you've heard the phrase, if it's not one thing, it's another.
Mhm.
That's a conventional wisdom. We hear that said all the time when something bad happens and it keeps happening back to back to back. And I've said it myself, good Lord, if it's not one thing is another. But the Bible counteracts that. Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for calamity, to give you an expected, my screen is covered here, to give you a future and a hope. And it reads a little differently, of course, depending on your version. But so you can see man's wisdom, God's wisdom doesn't match in that case. When it rains, it pours. That's another thing we say a lot. It's an adage that we say a lot. Biblical flip side of that is in Matthew 5:45, he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous. You also heard, you've made your bed, now lie in it. Counter to that is Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And then this last one that I'll mention is the 7-year itch. You hear some couples saying, oh, I'm coming up on that 7-year, or I had the 7-year itch. Or heaven forbid, we actually say people, oh, you got past 7 years. Why would we say that? But anywho. But the verse the counter to that is Proverbs 6:32. But a man who commits adultery has no sense. Whoever does so destroys himself. So when we think about conventional wisdom, what Paul was telling them at that time is you've been relying on your own wisdom up to this point. What I'm telling you is there is a different wisdom, and it is the Messiah. And that is the wisdom that we need to embrace. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this idea of being smart versus being wise. Do we agree that there is a difference? Yes, no, maybe so. Do we agree that there's a difference?
I do.
Okay. How do you define smart?
Something like, well, shoot.
I'll keep going. You're going right to it.
Something learned,
Yep. Okay. And then how do we define wise?
what we feel we already know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go
Through
ahead.
experience.
Deborah
Yeah.
said your experience. Okay. Yep. Knowledge based on your experience. So if we compare the two, smart refers to, I've got too much stuff open, having or showing a quick-witted intelligence. Wise refers to having or showing experience, knowledge, good judgment. Smart doesn't necessarily refer to experience and knowledge, but as we said, wise does. Smart can be used to refer to people of all ages. Think about our kids. I used to say this all the time. My kids are very smart. My kids are very smart now. They were smart, but I was also speaking it into the atmosphere. My kids are very smart. I still do that. But I've actually shifted it. I've actually shifted it to wisdom, that they have wisdom. Because wise is often associated with maturity. You don't usually say a kid is wise. Not typically. Smart is considered kind of informal word. Why, wisdom or wise, you usually use in more formal context. And then you look at smart as mostly used in spoken language. I don't tend to hear a lot of people talk about wise, using the term wise. Okay. So quick little story to kind of bring this to life. You, Laura, and Jim are walking down the street. Jim and Laura are walking a little bit in front of you as they're deeply immersed in conversation. Suddenly, a car comes barreling towards them. Jim immediately shouts, "There's a car coming. We have a high chance of suffering a major or fatal wound." Jim is a smart person. Laura, however, gets out of the way. Laura is a wise person and an alive person. Smart people know things. Wise people know what to do with it. Core difference between smart and wise. So 6 differences, and there's many more, but 6 differences between being wise and smart. So I'm going to go through these, and I would love for you to say, yep, I agree, no, I don't agree, or whatever you feel about them. So smart people feel satisfied when they can solve problems effectively. Wise people feel satisfied when they can inspire others. Thoughts? Is one good, one bad? Is it necessarily versus the other?
No, but when you say it like that, it feels
It feels dirty, doesn't it?
it feels like I've got to be one or the other. So are you suggesting that I can't be wise and smart simultaneously?
You tell me.
I think in my mind, true wisdom is being smart and wise.
Okay.
It's having the ability to be both simultaneously. So I'm smart, but I use wisdom. I mean, I think it's a fool who goes through that long explanation and waits for the car to hit them. But it's nice to know that they understand
the impact
if they don't move in the car with him. So I hope that you can do both.
Okay. So where do you tend to fall in this? That's probably the question I should ask, because this is not judgment, right, guys? We're all smart in some areas, wise in other areas, and not always at the same time. Okay. So as you look at this, where do you fall? Typically.
I believe more on the side of wisdom because I'm more of a thinker. You know, I think beyond what is seen, you know, and what could be obvious. So I will more so dissect things to make sure as much as I can know that I am operating in wisdom.
Okay, so let's bring it down. I love that response, but let's bring it down to this that's specifically on the screen.
Okay.
So between solving problems effectively, that's your kind of main focus, because you just said you're a thinker, so I already know where in my mind you are. Or feel satisfied when you can inspire others. Is there one you tend to lean more to than the other one?
What was I'm not looking at the screen.
Smart people, they feel satisfied when they can solve problems effectively. Wise people, they feel satisfied when they can inspire others.
I would say still more on the wise, but then in this case, really both, if that's could be possible. Yeah, because I can roll in both of those areas.
Good. Yeah, this is one that's interesting, right? Because there are some who, some people know a lot. And when you ask them a question about something that is in their wheelhouse and they got the answer, They are all about, let me just solve problems. There are some people who just are masters at problem solving. They can do it. They just got it. And just give me the problem. Y'all go away. I'll figure it out and I'll give you the answer. In some cases, that's good. I'm like that in some areas. Like, just leave me alone. I got this. Let me just do this. And then there's other areas where, because I have the experience, I've talked about my P&G experience. I'm in sales capability. So I design our sales college curriculums. And I love training people. I love using my 25 plus years of sales experience to bring together a curriculum that is going to inspire and train people. So I use my wisdom in that realm. So that's one example. So let's look at another one. Smart people like talking to express their ideas and opinions. Wise people like listening to others' thoughts and add comments occasionally. What do we think about this one? Again, don't think about it as good and bad. I know it's how it's positioned, but let's not think about it as good and bad. Which area do you find, if we're being self-aware, let's be self-aware. If we're being self-aware, where do you feel like you land? Nobody wants to be self-aware today. All right.
I think I would just be smart. I just like to express my ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm also wise because I like listening to others. You know,
And
other people's thoughts. And
these things they can go back and forth. You know, the kid who was always the one that always raised their hand, like you're the one that always raise your hand in class because you have the answer, and the teacher at some point stopped calling on them because let's give somebody else a chance. That one. And then Watsika, can you mute Watsika?
yes.
Thank you. And then you have people who like listening to others, for example. I can sit in a room and just do nothing but listen. I don't have to say a word. I love it. I always say I love to be entertained. So I don't know if it's entertaining, if I'm getting wisdom by being entertained, but I do love listening to other people talk.
I think I have a balanced approach.
Okay.
Where I'm a mixture of smart and wise. I mean, I think a wise person will listen to others and soak up the knowledge that they can gain, but also feeling like you still got to kind of do research on your own, make sure what you're understanding and kind of know stuff. Just because those people aren't always going to be there, kind of got to, reach out and learn stuff on your own and be smart in certain situations. So I think you kind of have to be balanced in with those two, have wisdom and be smart as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great bill. That's a great bill. Let's look at another one. Go ahead, please. Was somebody else about to say something?
Like the scripture, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Being slow to speak, quick to hear. I agree with Brother Norman. I really would rather sit and absorb, listen to what is going on, and yes, absorb as much as possible so that I can use that as a springboard to explore and learn new things.
Yeah, I think the problem we have is oftentimes, thank you, Pastor Cheryl. The problem we have is, unfortunately, sometimes when we listen, we do just take what is being said as gospel. To your point, Norma, we do have to go study and assume, and show ourselves approved, as they say, and this is especially in the Black church, and it's not just the Black church, in church, we tend to take whatever the pastor says as gospel, and we never go back, fact check, we never go back for our own interpretation. And so we should not do that. All right,
Hey, Chris,
yes.
last thing, and I think the other part of that is, it's, for me at least, is a lot of times those people who listen, a lot of times they then don't share their wisdom, and so the issue becomes they're great listeners, but it doesn't help us if they don't talk.
Yeah.
So to me it's vitally important that they do both, because if you have it but you don't share it, what's the point?
Yep, I agree with that. we always talk about, what are we, all the meat that we take inside the walls, what do we do with it outside the walls? Great point. Now this one is, I think, a more push of one versus the other. Smart people may impose their thoughts on others sometimes. Wise people, they accept the differences between others and themselves. I think we've all probably fallen into the trap of how smart people are identified in this case of imposing our thoughts on others. But I think we probably all agree, especially in the environment that we live in right now, that us being able to accept differences and being able to talk about our differences without fighting and killing and all of those things is the wiser move. Jackie, you have something?
No.
Okay. All right. And then the last one I'll talk here is acquiring and applying knowledge very quickly versus taking more time to digest knowledge, but understand it deeply. Now I will say for this one, for me personally, I tend to be on the left for the smart side. I can acquire something and apply it really, really fast, but I'm probably going to forget it. I can spend weeks memorizing something, keynote, whatever. And as soon as that thing is over, it is gone because I've acquired it so I can apply it and apply it well, very quickly, but I don't necessarily retain it for the long term. Now, my husband, on the other hand, is fantastic at this. He's fantastic on digesting knowledge and then getting a really deep understanding of it so that he can pull it back. If you asked him a year from now, he could pull it right up. That is not me.
But I will not remember. On the flip side of that is I can't do it fast. So don't tell me something and then think that I'm going to remember it because I'm probably not, right?
That is accurate.
But I think though what we're talking about now though goes more toward the way that we operate as human beings, right? As much as anything else.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anybody else? Different perspective? All right. Last, I think this is really the last one. Smart people, aware of their abilities and are confident in them. And then wise people, aware of their weaknesses and stay humble to learn more. Again, this one feels like you got to be either or. I think it can go both ways. I think there are certain areas of our life where we are very aware of our abilities and we are absolutely confident you can't beat me on this day doing this. But then also knowing that there are certain areas of our lives or our abilities where we do not have that strength and are not nearly as confident in that area. And but knowing that and being willing to learn. That is the key.
Christy, I have a question here because
Yeah.
this is the one that probably is the toughest for me to even talk about. But that is, what about those people who are aware of their weaknesses and just avoid putting themselves in the position to have to deal with their weaknesses?
Right. That's real. That's very real. So what's your question?
Well, I mean, is that so as a person who does that, do they fall on the wise side or not?
No, that is not wisdom, right? That is not wisdom to know that you're not. Now, it depends on what the thing is, right? I mean, if you know you can't, save a life and you're going to go out and try to do surgery, well, there's wisdom not to go do that, sure. But to put yourself in a space where I know I'm not good at it, so I'm just not going to try. That's not smart. You learn, you only gain the experience and the knowledge by doing and by trying or by learning. So to say that I'm not even going to try to learn is not smart, nor is it wise. I can't.
I mean, I think it depends on what you're talking about learning, like, and kind of just for me, I'm not a yard guy as far as planting flowers, changing mold. I usually just pay someone to do it because I don't want to deal with the time of, kind of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I know maybe I could do it, but I'd rather use that time to spend with my family as opposed to now I do, cut the yard. I know how to do that. So, I mean, there's a balance of, I do certain things. I don't think gives me a huge advantage to do that. So, I mean, I think that's my weakness. I mean, doing yard, planting plants and flowers and stuff. So I kind of identify that's my weakness. But
I think that's
again,
also, I agree with you, Norman. You set the tone right at the top by saying it depends. The answer to most questions is it depends. So I agree with you. And then that one, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But there are some things where you just make the decision that you're just not going to be, you don't want to be better at it. You don't want to take the time to be better at it. But it's something really important. I would say doing the yard is probably not one of those things. I can't think of one right now. But yeah, I agree with it. It depends.
Well, what about people who pray? I mean, we're using practical things, and I want to, in my mind, you need to kind of transition and think about it from a spiritual perspective. But you ever met that person who is phenomenal? You talk to them, they're great, but the moment you ask them to pray, they get quiet. And it's because maybe because they're not good at it or not comfortable doing it. And so their rationale becomes, I just don't do it because I don't think I'm good at it. Or so if God gives us these talents and these abilities in his kingdom and tells us that we're his people who are responsible for building his kingdom, and yet we choose not to do those things that we think we're not good at, then are we in some ways suggesting that maybe he's not all powerful and can't give us everything we need because I'm choosing not to do it because I don't think I can do it?
James, excuse me. It's me.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. On that note, when you said that, that's me. I can pray sometime. When I'm asked to pray, I don't know, it's like I'm caught off guard or something. And then I might pray and then kind of stumble over it. And then there's other times the pray, and Christy knows me really well through our women's thing and everything. And then there's sometimes I can just pray and it just flows. And I think when I'm asked to pray or whatever, my confidence level sometimes it just drops. I don't know. I don't know what happens. But I don't know. I just, like I said, I just pray about it and I ask God to help me with that. I said, Lord, why is it at times that I seem like it's there and I can just flow with it? And then other times when somebody asks me or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's just like I'm grabbing, I'm gasping for air, trying to figure out what to say next. What, you know what am I making sense?
But I mean, I think with the prayer piece is, you can have your weaknesses praying on the spot. That's just,
right.
When people are called to, but you still have the ability to be, do a great prayer. You like to have preparation. That's just how some people work. I mean, some people's gifts, their ability and confidence, you can ask me to pray anytime and I'm ready to go. Others, they can still pray, but they need preparation. So they kind of know the weakness is, I'm always willing to pray, but just, you gotta give me a heads up. That's just how some people, just like some people you have them deliver a word, they can deliver a word on the spot. Others, I need time to study, prepare, and those types of things. So it just kind of, I said that it's subjective to each individual of what they can do and how they really go about doing it, whether it's called on the spot.
Right.
I mean, and you can pray for that, but sometimes it's just not your gift to just do stuff like that.
Right.
Or in the way that you see other people do it.
Right.
That's the thing. Because what and Wasika, I agree with you and I think the word you said was confidence. Because in our women's Bible study, I ask you to pray. I don't warn you, you know that.
Right. That's true.
You just flow. But you also know us. You're confident with us. So I think it just also is environment. I think it's also environment where you are at that time.
But I know y'all on here too, but I don't know. But like you said, it's just something that happened. It's just more myself.
So, and I asked that question not to be funny, Christy. I said that just because, we hear this in education all the time, where we have kids who come in and their parents will come in and say, look, I was bad at math. My kid does horrible on math testing. And in my lifetime working with people like that, what I've rarely found, almost never found a student who was a bad test taker. What I have found is a student who was not prepared. And so for me, some of this comes down to how prepared are we? How closely are we living with Christ? How much of time are we spending with him? What, do we have that type of relationship with him that we know we need? And in those moments when we get called on to do something in his name, does it expose the reality that we're not quite where we feel like we ought to be and where we know we ought to be? I don't know the answer, just a question.
Good, good. So we've talked about smart, wise. We've read 1 Corinthians 1, 18 through 31. And the overarching theme was wisdom, right? So what did Solomon ask God for? Did he ask him for wisdom directly?
No.
What did he ask for? Turn to 1 Kings 3. 1 Kings 3.
I know God said he would give him that.
Mm-hmm.
First King, what please?
1 Kings 3, 5 through 13. So go to verse 9. Actually, verse 9 gives us a quick place. And it says, and I'm reading out an NIV, so give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? So, did he ask for wisdom?
Not directly with the words, but I guess when it all comes down to it, he did.
Mm-hmm. I had to look this up myself because I was like, he didn't actually say wisdom. But he really did. If you look at the definition of wisdom, which is what I have on the screen, the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. So when he says to distinguish between right and wrong, that's good judgment and the quality of being wise. Okay. So he did indeed ask for wisdom, and then God gave him more than he asked for because he did not ask for the typical things that folks would ask for, riches and, fame and all those types of things. And so we think about the importance of wisdom in the Bible. Wisdom is mentioned 219 times in the Bible. Now, smart, intelligent kind of goes hand in hand, but the word smart is never mentioned in the Bible. Intelligent or intelligence is mentioned 7 times in the Bible. I've added the scriptures here on the screen. 1 Samuel 25 and 3, Acts 13, 7, 1 Corinthians 1, 19. And then 2 Chronicles 2 and 12. He actually says that Solomon is both wise and intelligent. Same thing in the book of Daniel, Daniel 5:11 and Daniel 5 verse 14. He calls Daniel both wise and intelligent. So James, to your point, which was the very first point you made, doesn't it make sense for us to strive to be both? Yes, that is indeed the goal. The goal is to be both smart and wise. Because if you know, but you do not do, you're considered someone who is smart. So you got all this head knowledge, but you don't really do anything with it. Yeah, you're smart. But if you learn and apply that knowledge, even though you may make mistakes, because wise people do make mistakes, but the key is because you have experience. Anytime you have experiences, you're going to make mistakes. Things are not always going to go well. You're working towards becoming wise. So just as Solomon prayed for wisdom, perhaps we should be changing our prayer as well. So if we are not praying for wisdom, we should be. We should be, because wisdom, and the Bible says a whole lot of things about wisdom, but wisdom is what we should seek. Wisdom is what we should seek. And based on what we read in 1 Corinthians, we know that wisdom and the Messiah goes together. So if we believe that gospel message, and we do, wisdom is something that we should absolutely ask for, and God will deliver. Questions? Any questions? Final thoughts? Final thoughts? All right, with that, hopefully all of us are headed to the house of the Lord. If we are not there, well, I know some of us aren't there yet, but I'm going to go get dressed real fast. You can stop recording.